So in this episode, I want us to connect our Express application to MongoDB Atlas. And to do that, we will be needing two more packages, that is Mongoose and .env package. And to install these packages, I have just opened my Visual Studio Code terminal. You can do the same. When you look at the very top, you will see terminal. When you click it, you will see new terminal. When you click new terminal, that should open this terminal right here. So let's install those two packages by this command npm I mongoose, and it have a double O here and then the .env. Mongoose will enable us to connect to MongoDB, and later on we'll be using it to create schemas and models, and then the .env package will allow us to read environment variables from a file called .env. So I have already installed Mongoose and the .env package. So if I come to my package.json file, you can see that I have Mongoose installed here, version 5.11 and .env version 8.2. So for you, just run this command and it should install Mongoose and .env. As those two packages installs, you can go to your browser and visit mongodb.com. If you don't have an account with MongoDB, you can simply create one for free. You will see a button saying try free next to the sign in button. And once you create the account, you will land a page just like this one. And the first thing that you need to do is to create a cluster. So right here, you will click build a cluster. Just create a free cluster right here, and then you are taken to a page like this one where you can select a cloud provider. We have AWS, Google Cloud, and Azure. In this case, I'll just go with the defaults. Okay, you can also change the region if you want, but I'll go with the default. So I'll just come at the very bottom and create a cluster. Now this will take 1 to 3 minutes to complete, so be patient and wait your cluster to be created. When this completes, all you need to do is to click on connect. So the first thing is to add an IP address to be whitelisted by MongoDB Atlas, and I won't be adding my current IP address because sometimes it changes, so I'll allow access from anywhere and add IP address, and then we need to create a database user. Okay, so right here I will enter a username and a password. So I'll enter a password test 987. This is just an example password. You should create a more strong password than this one, and then I will create the database user. Once this is done, we can now go to the next step. Choose a connection method, and I'll go with the second option here, connect your application. And in this last step, we will get a connection string. Okay, so I will copy this string the way it is. I can just click this copy here to copy the string, and we will be needing our database user password and also the database name. Okay, so I'll close this one. Once we copy the string, we are deploying your changes, so this will also take some time to complete, and I'll leave it at it as we go back to our code editor. By now, your Mongoose and .env packages should be installed. So at the moment, I'll just close the panel, and I want us to store our connection string on an environment variable. So to use the environment variable, we need to configure the .env dependency or package. So right here, we will require .env and then right here we will tap a .config method and invoke it, and this should configure our .env dependency. Okay, and we can now be able to read environment variables from a .env file. Let's create a .env file. So I'll come at the root of our application, click add, and then .env. The reason we use a .env file is because it makes our application to be more secure. So for example, when we use this connection string right here, this code won't be pushed to GitHub. This file won't be pushed to GitHub, and it is not accessible from the public. It will be available on the server, but not on the public code like on GitHub, and that makes our application to be more secure. So right here, I will create a variable connection underscore string, and it is a convention to use caps, and then right here I'll paste the string that we copied from MongoDB, and we enter the password for the database user here, test 987, and then we enter the database name. So right here I'll say to do app. I'm using camel casing to do app and then the password. So now this is our connection string, which is stored on an environment variable called connection underscore string. So how can we read this string from this file? So in our index.js file, I'll come here and create a constant, and I'll call it connection underscore string. Spell this one correctly. Will be equal to, we have a global object called process, and this global object have a property called env, standing for environment variable. So with this global object we can read environment variables from our .env file. So the next thing, we will tap a connection string, which is now our environment variable from this file. I'll just copy this, go back to index.js file and paste it here. So now our connection string is available on this constant, okay, on this constant. And now the next thing, we need to require mongoose. So at the very top I'll say const mongoose will be equal to require in brackets mongoose, and now we can use this mongoose to connect to our database. So at the very bottom I will say mongoose dot connect, and the first parameter here is our connection string. So I can get that from connection string, this one, which is reading our connection string from the environment variable, and then this will take some time to process. So we can tap a .then method, and with this .then method we can log something to the console. So an arrow function, and I'll say console.log, and we can say the connection was successful. So MongoDB connection established. Okay, and I can take this to the next line, and if the connection fails we can catch that error. So right here dot catch, an arrow function, we get an error, and then we can console dot error, and then we enter a message, MongoDB connection failed. And then we can add an error at the very end, error dot message. Now with this we will get some duplication warnings. So the first parameter here is usually the connection string, and then we have the second parameter, which is options, and with these options we can avoid those duplication errors. Okay, so right here just use these options. So use new URL parser and set this one to true, comma, and the second one here is use create index, set it to true, comma, and the last one is use unified topology, and you can set this one to true. So now with this we won't get any duplication errors, and this is how we connect to MongoDB database. So right here we have Mongoose. The first parameter is our connection string, which we are getting from a .env file, and then we pass an object here with several options. If this is successful, if the connection here is successful, we tap a .then method and log this message to the console. If it fails, we tap a .catch method and display the error on the console. So by now this one should work if this one completed, and it seems that it's still completing, and yeah, now it's complete. Now let's test this one. Okay, so we can go to the server and we should see MongoDB connection established. So I'll open command prompt, and I had stopped the server, so I'll just run nodemon, enter. So we have gotten the first message, server running on port 5000 and MongoDB connection established. So perfect, our connection worked. And to test this one out, we can enter an incorrect password, maybe omit the 7, and come back and see if this should work. So the .env file is not detected by nodemon. So you can see how secure our application is. So I can come back here and maybe change something, remove this one, and then add it again. So that should restart our server. Let's see if we will get an error. Server running on port 5000, MongoDB connection failed, bad auth, authentication failed. So you can see if we enter an incorrect password, the connection is failing, meaning that this is working perfect. Now one last thing, now that you have learned about environment variables, I want us to change this port to use an environment variable, and this is because when we deploy our application to the cloud, this port is not may not be available. Like, we are not assured port 5000 will be available on that server that we will deploy our application. Now for this reason, an environment variable is usually used. So right here we will set another const and set it to port, and then we will use our process object and then .env, and the environment variable for the port is port. So this should read a port from the environment variable called port, and it will be dynamically assigned to us once we deploy this application to the cloud. But because we are working locally, we can optionally define this environment variable here. So right here we can just say use this one or this one. So if this is not available, this one will be used. So right now we can replace this one with port, and this should read either from an environment variable. If this is not a variable, this port will be used. Okay, so let's see if our server is still running, and as you can see, it's still running correctly. Now to test if this is working, we can set a port on our .env file here. So we should go to the next line. I'll scroll to the end here and press enter. I set an environment variable called port and set it to 3000. So I'll come back to my index.js file and mess up with something, maybe include 3 dots, and this should restart the server. Come back and our server should run on port 3000 and not 5000. But as the look of things, this is not working. So the issue is our message. So whatever port it connects to, we are still getting this message. So we should dynamically display this message depending on our port. So instead of using these quotes, I'll be using backticks right here. I use a backtick, and with this we can use a variable right here. Okay, I will use a $sign and then brackets here and pass in our port variable. So now we should correctly see that it is running on port 3000. So back here, server running on port 3000. Perfect. So you can see that our port is coming from an environment variable, but in this application locally we don't want to define the port, so I'll simply remove this. It was for a testing purpose, and now we should see that our server is running on port 5000. So right here, server should restart. Maybe I can change something, remove one here, and let's see. Server running on port 5000. So this is now cool. We have successfully connected our application to MongoDB, and also we are using a .env file to read our connection string, which is more secure. We have also worked on our port so that when we deploy our application, we will get the port from an environment variable which will be assigned to that particular server. And that's it for this video. I'll see you next.